Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is a different call than the one I had anticipated. I had expected that I would be in a roundtable discussion with Secretary McMahon, the Secretary of Education, along with HELP committee colleagues, and that I would have been broadcasting the discussion on my phone with you able to listen in. A few hours ago, the roundtable discussion was canceled. But I thought it would still be an important thing to kind of describe why. We have not seen Secretary McMahon before the HELP Committee since her confirmation over a year ago. And obviously that confirmation was very focused upon the plans of the administration that had been announced as part of President Trump's campaign to dismantle the Department of Education. Even though I voted for Linda McMahon for Small Business Administrator and worked well with her in Trump term one, her commitment to helping the administration carry out this, in my view, very negative and destructive dismantling led me to vote against her. But in my view, the secretary and other leaders have pursued a strategy that is unlawful in taking programs within the Department of Education that are statutory in nature and sort of willy-nilly ending them, shrinking them, or handing them over to other agencies that are not equipped to manage them, and then in many instances don't even want to have them. This was going to be an opportunity, finally, when I heard that Secretary McMahon was coming before the HELP Committee, to ask her questions about the rationale behind these changes, who is monitoring them to see if they're successful or not. And I had a lot of constituent concerns and complaints that I wanted to share. I'll give you three examples. I am the co-chair of the Senate's Bipartisan Career and Technical Education Caucus. The Department of Education has taken career and technical education, which it has managed pretty effectively for decades, and they just kicked it over to the Department of Labor, which, as all of you know, has been really plagued with leadership scandals of the recently departed Secretary of Labor and other scandals as well. I have had a number of concerns expressed by school districts in Virginia and by the Department of Education about the way this handoff has been mismanaged, which is making it harder for our schools to receive federal funding and offer the high quality CTE, which most people now realize is so important. That's one example. Here's another one, public service loan forgiveness. I asked Secretary McMahon at her confirmation hearing whether she would commit to implementing the public service loan forgiveness law. And I asked her that because in Trump term one, the Department of Education approved virtually no public service loan forgiveness applications. You were down to the kind of hundreds over 4 years, dramatically different than previous administrations, both Democratic and Republican. The Biden administration restored public service loan forgiveness, followed the statute, and many Virginians got their loans forgiven, thank goodness, because of the public service they were providing. But according to a regulation that has been promulgated by President Trump and the DOE in term two, now the Department of Education gets to scrutinize the institutions that individuals work with and decide whether they think that's public service or not. There have been lawsuits about this, but I wanted to ask the secretary, who is going to make the decision about public service loan applications, about whether people get the relief that Congress requires them to get pursuant to the PSLF statute. Finally, I wanted to ask about the entire issue of student loans. Student loans have been administered by the Department of Education, probably the largest program within the department. There was an initial announcement that the DOE would hand over student loans to the Small Business Administration, which seemed odd to me, unclear that the SBA wanted that responsibility. And I think since, even within just the first year plus, now the decision is maybe that student loans will be a responsibility of the Department of the Treasury. This is a hugely important issue. It is millions of Americans that have student loan obligations. And many experts predict that we are facing what might be the largest set of defaults on student loans in the history of this country, and there's got to be a plan for dealing with it. Those were the kinds of questions that the Department of Education needs to answer, and in my view, needs to answer in public. And so I was happy to hear that we were finally, at the end of April, more than a year into her tenure, going to have an opportunity to have a hearing with the Secretary of Education. But then I learned that the hearing was only behind closed doors with no press or public access. This is not classified information. I'm on the Armed Services and Foreign Relations committees. I get a lot of information in the SCIF that's classified that I can't talk about, but none of this is classified information. It's all, what is the Department of Education doing with taxpayer dollars to carry out statutory mandates that the department has? And so I was unwilling to accept the notion that the discussion of matters of this magnitude, that matter so much to Virginians, can only be behind closed doors. And so I sent out a press advisory yesterday notifying all my colleagues, Democratic and Republican, that I was going to attend the hearing, but that I was going to have a phone and I was going to have a dial-in number so that the press who had been excluded from the meeting could hear the discussion. That then has led to quite a back and forth between me and the committee leadership, and then I think especially the White House. I was told that I could not do that at a hearing. I pointed out that the rules of the hearing do not prohibit, the rules of the Help Committee do not prohibit me from doing that. In fact, Help Committee rules express the overwhelming preference that our committee meetings be public in nature. I feel like the committee rules supported my position. But I did point out, in trying to work this out with committee leadership, that I would be willing to abide by a closed door meeting so long as the Secretary of Education would commit to appear publicly before the Help Committee sometime in the next 6 weeks to answer these questions in public, in the transparent way that we need to operate in to exercise the oversight that an authorizing committee should exercise. And I indicated that if we could get a commitment on a public hearing within the next 6 weeks, then I would stand down on my pledge to broadcast the closed door session, because I would just save those questions for the public hearing. My committee chair made effort with the White House to get that commitment. The White House was not willing to make the commitment. And so I said, well, I'm going to show up and I'm going to broadcast the hearing. At that point, a few hours ago, the hearing was canceled. The Trump administration does not want to be transparent about these dramatic changes they are making, which affect the lives of our students and so many others, and affect the American economy, because education and the provision of skills is like the core to our economy. What are they afraid of? Why don't they want to answer these questions? Why will they go to some committees like the Appropriations Committee and be willing to answer as they did yesterday, but not be willing to come to the Education Committee? I have not gotten a good answer to the question. I'm going to continue to press to have a public hearing. I think that's what Secretary McMahon and the Trump administration owes Congress and owes the American public. I regret that we were not able to do that today, but I'm going to continue to press to get a public hearing where these items, which again are not classified in nature, can be discussed in full view of the public. And with that, I'm glad to open it up and take your questions.
Reminder to folks just joining the Zoom, if you have a question, please put your name and outlet in the chat and we will call on folks in that order. Our first question is from Mark with Education Week.
Hi, Senator King. Can you hear me all right?
I can, Mark. Thanks.
Thanks for doing the call. Appreciate it. Just a couple quick questions. First one is, I'm wondering if you can share who made the decision to cancel the meeting, like who actually sent that notification. And then it's sort of related to that. I know that the budget law that was approved in February, I believe, included a requirement for the committee to have regular meetings with the department about the status of the interagency agreements. I'm wondering if you can talk about the extent to which those meetings have happened, who's involved with them, how they've been going, any details you can share on
Yeah,
that.
so in reverse order, the meetings have not been happening, at least to the knowledge of this health committee member. If there had been discussions between the department and, committee leadership, I've never been included on them. And that was one of the topics I think that was going to be a main subject of discussion today, was the interagency agreements. So as far as I know, there have not been discussions. There certainly haven't been discussions with the full committee. I don't know who made the decision. The decision was communicated by the committee chair, Senator Cassidy's office. I believe Senator Cassidy wants to have a public hearing as much as I do. But I think at the end of the day, it was the White House not willing to make a commitment that Secretary McMahon would be available for a public hearing before the Health Committee that led to the discussion being canceled.
Thanks for your help.
Our next question is from Kara with K-12 Dive.
Hey, Carol.
Yes, hi. Thank you for inviting us. Mark asked one of my questions, but I'll ask this. At the appropriations subcommittee meeting yesterday, Secretary McMahon was asked repeatedly about the interagency agreements. And she did say there were several hiccups, but that it was going fine and people were just being moved from one building to the other building. They're the same people, same emails. And in fact, she talked about they're still exploring transferring IDEA responsibilities to either labor or HHS or both. So, but you're saying, and others I've heard are talking about complaints from constituents, these
Yes.
delays, but there's two different stories. So I guess, what can, everybody's looking for more answers, like you said.
Yep.
What can they do in the meantime to get more details?
Yeah, the fact that there are two different stories isn't that unusual, but that's why public hearings are a great thing, because people can watch a hearing and gauge the questions and the answers and reach their own conclusions about whether things are going well or not. I had a number of constituent complaints around the career and technical education, a number of concerns around student loans and public service loan forgiveness. And I'm glad you mentioned the IDEA. That is a major concern. And to be a year plus in and still not know, well, I guess IDEA enforcement, I guess it could go to HHS, I guess it could go to the Department of Labor. This is not a minor matter. If you are the parent of a student with a designated disability who has an IEP and is entitled under federal law to receive an appropriate education, where that gets enforced is not just like a minor thing where it gets kicked around from here to there. I was able to pick up some of the discussion before the Appropriations Subcommittee yesterday. The Secretary seemed unaware that the President's budget proposed drastic cuts to IDEA enforcement, which has often taken place in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education. So that's why you have public hearings, is in the preparation for public hearings, people have to, master the facts and be up on their game as best as they can. And then they have to explain if it is a good idea to hand these programs over, then come tell the committee why. I'm going to use an analogy to another committee that I have served on since I came to the Senate Armed Services Committee. A commandant of the Marine Corps, now a couple of commandants ago, David Berger, made the decision that the Marine Corps needed a dramatic restructuring of its force to deal with the increasing importance of the Indo-Pacific region to America's defense needs. And so he put a very ambitious force restructuring proposal on the table and defended that repeatedly before the Armed Services Committee in public, to senators who were skeptical, to other senators who were supportive. He didn't hide the ball. He didn't break all the china and try to do it behind closed doors. He came and made the presentation to the committee. And at the end of the day, the committee became convinced, at least a majority of the committee, that it was moving in the right direction. If Secretary McMahon believes that CTE programs should be in DOL or student loan programs should be in the Treasury, do the analysis, come sit down and eyeball Congress and say, I know many years ago you said these programs should be within DOE, but let me tell you, here is the plan for how they can be done better. That's the way you do reforms. That's the way I did reforms of state agencies when I was governor, is I made the pitch to the legislature who was funding the state agencies and writing the statutes that there was a better way to do business. But it seems like this administration, and I don't think Secretary McMahon is alone in this, they just want to kind of do it their way and avoid answering the questions. And guess what? When you do that, you tend to do a bad job at it. You tend to put it in the hands of people who didn't want the work to begin with, who don't have the staff. Many of the agencies to which these programs are being handed were dramatically affected by DOGE cuts, by the fork in the road letter and people accepting voluntary retirements. We're hearing that at DOE, they're having sacked too many people to do the IDEA enforcement. They're having to bring people back. There's a right way and a wrong way to do reform. And the right way to do it is do the analysis, make a proposal, let Congress, the authorizing appropriators, kick the tires. And then if you can persuade that this is the right way, then let's do it. But don't just break all the china, make all the moves, make all the changes, not care about the consequences, and then refuse to come and answer questions about them.
Thank you so
Next.
much.
Our next question is from Michael with the New York Times.
Hey, Michael.
Hey there, Senator. A couple questions for you. You referenced the White House a couple of times in your recollection of what's happened there. Are you? And it sort of sounds like you're saying that the White House is the one calling the shots here. I just want to be clear on that's what you're saying. Is that would seem? I'm not a congressional expert, but that would seem a little unusual for Senate hearings. And then I also want to just sort of ask again about this meeting today. You said that it was your impression this was going to be about the interagency agreements. Was there anything else on that meeting? Was there an agenda today? And
Yes.
okay.
My understanding, to take them in reverse order, was it was going to be just a roundtable discussion. And yes, about the interagency agreements, but about other items as well. The public service loan forgiveness. I mean, I didn't take it when I heard that, we're going to have this opportunity for a hearing with Secretary McMahon. The president just sent his budget over for DOE. So we are having hearings in other committees where we're asking questions of cabinet secretaries about the budget submission. We'll have that hearing with Secretary Hegseth tomorrow in the Armed Services Committee, where we're going to talk to the secretary about the budget submission. So this is the time of year when the cabinet secretaries come before us to talk about the president's budget. And because the budget is about all the policies, we get to ask questions about the policies too. So my understanding was that it was going to be kind of a free-flowing discussion with the secretary about what DOE is doing. My understanding is that cabinet secretaries cannot appear before Congress without the permission of the White House. And that's the permission, for them to appear, and they also have to grant permission about the date on which they appear. And so my effort was, okay, if you want to do this private and not have me include folks, because my worry is they would only do this in private. I mean, we've not had a public hearing yet on the Iran war, and we're 2 weeks into it. Everything's being done in classified so that we can't talk about what we know. But if you want to allay my concern that you're just trying to hide this behind closed door, just give me a commitment for a public hearing before the Health Committee sometime in the next 6 weeks. You just sent over the president's budget. We got a lot of questions about it. We have a lot of questions about the interagency agreements. We have a lot of constituent concerns.
Just to clarify on that, you were willing to do this behind closed doors today if there was a commitment for a public hearing at some point, within that time period.
Absolutely. I would have said fine. Because my worry was the closed hearing was going to be it. But if you give me the commitment on the normal standard, cabinet member comes to the authorizing committee and answers questions before the public, then okay, I'll go to the roundtable and we'll have an off the record discussion. But my understanding was that cannot be done without White House approval, and they would not approve it.
And just to follow up on that, did they give you any indication, or what was their argument for having a closed door? Why did they want? Was there anything
I do not
particular,
know the
or
art.
what was your impression of?
I did
Yeah.
not. I have no idea why it was set up that way. I have no idea. Clearly, we are not dealing with classified information. I mean, I get it if it's a, if it's an armed services or foreign relations or intel hearing, some of what we do has to be done behind closed doors, but no one indicated that this was classified information or confidential in any other way.
Is there any precedent for that? And that last one, I appreciate the time. In your time in Congress, I mean, have you, like, for a cabinet secretary to come over and meet with committee members behind closed doors, that kind of thing? Again, outside of classified information.
We have had, yes, in the Help Committee and in others, we have had closed door roundtable discussions before, but never in lieu of the traditional public hearing. Sometimes it's a supplemental. I remember, some earlier discussion with the Help Committee, and maybe together with some other committees during the early days of COVID, we would have some discussions about, hey, just what are the latest trends we all need to be aware of? But they were never in lieu of the public hearing. They might happen, a week before the public hearing. So by the time we're at the public hearing, we've sharpened our questions. We've maybe set aside issues that we don't need to ask questions about. But this is a trend that troubles me, and I can't separate out completely from. We've not been able to have a public hearing about the war. I mean, we're in a war, for God's sake. And until Secretary Hegseth came today before the House and tomorrow before the Senate, the only briefings that we have been given about this war that's cost 13 American lives, injured hundreds of Americans, killed more than 1,000 Iranian civilians, cost apparently more than $25 billion, raised everybody's gas prices. The only hearings we're having are in classified, where we're not allowed to share the information with the public. And so I was very, very worried that this was an effort to just hide the ball. And that's why I was willing to accept a roundtable discussion as long as there was a commitment to do the normal annual public hearing about the president's budget submission. And I was very disappointed that the White House would not make that commitment.
Next question is from Linda with the 74.
Thank you, Senator. You may have addressed this at the beginning of the call. Have there been previous requests for the secretary to, in addition to when she was,
Yes.
Came before confirmation? I'm just curious how many
Yes.
requests there have been for her to come before the committee.
Yes, these requests have come up in committee hearings. And the chairman has said we will have a public hearing, but the actual pinning it down to a date and a time and getting the secretary here is not something that the chairman can control. The chairman can make a request, but my understanding is this is the White House's decision as to whether it will send a cabinet secretary and when it will send a cabinet secretary. And so, yes, there has been a frustration. I've been frustrated about this. And my recollection is, and I'll have my press staff put this up in chat if I'm right about this. I think the Democrats on the Help Committee have sent at least one formal letter requesting a hearing with Secretary McMahon as we grew more and more frustrated about the absence of any public discussion about these wholesale changes that are going on.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Our last question is from Mackenzie with Politico.
And before Mackenzie, again, I just want to make sure my team, my education and press team heard that. I think there was a letter sent. If I'm right about that, please post that up. And I also believe it has come up in other hearings that, hey, we need to dig into these wholesale changes to know whether they're good or bad. Okay, to Mackenzie.
Yeah. Hi, Senator. I know that Senator Cassidy had said back in February that he was working on getting McMahon to have to appear before the help committee for a hearing. And like you said, that he has been open for having a public hearing. He
Yes.
just put out a statement regarding today's meeting, saying that, quote, unfortunately, Democrats undermined a good faith conversation with Secretary McMahon. We even rescheduled the original meeting so Democrats could make it. Democrats will not dictate the terms of today's meeting and lost the chance to speak to the secretary today. So that's what he just said. And so like, I'm wondering, like, do you still like have sort of a like open dialogue there with Cassidy about, scheduling something?
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't fault Senator Cassidy in this sense. I think he has been trying to get the public hearing. He said it in February. We've sent this letter. I think he would want the public hearing. That's what a committee chair wants. But the decision is made by the White House, and they're not coming through. And again, I don't think we didn't undermine a discussion. We had a reasonable request. We don't want this just to be discussed in private. There's got to be a public hearing. We've been hearing for months now that, there's going to be, we're going to have a public hearing. We were talking about it in February. Okay, it's going to be May this weekend. There hadn't been a public hearing. The president sent his budget over a month ago now. It's got some shocking stuff in there about the Department of Education that we would like to ask about. All these interagency agreements, it's all happening behind closed doors without our ability to understand it or ask questions about why. And so, behind closed doors is not sufficient. It's not sufficient for me. I don't think it's sufficient for my colleagues. And so we need to just keep pressing to actually get the administration to be willing to discuss this in public. If they were proud of what they were doing, if they felt that what they were doing was in the interest of American students or American families or American teachers, they wouldn't mind coming and sharing it in public with the Congress and the American public.